I couldn't have done this if I had to explain it to non-native writers on the show, what this is. I needed them to know exactly what I'm talking about and then give me more about where they're from, because there's such commonality from each indigenous sort of community. We were just trying to tell who we were in the most realistic way possible. So the mix of Taika, me, FX, giving us the freedom to work with native creatives. It was just this like magical recipe for what happened.
So you and Taika Waititi, who's the co-creator of Reservation Dogs, met in 2004, I think at the Sundance Institute. So that's a long time ago. How did that initial meeting very eventually evolve into Reservation Dogs?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was the meeting where we became friends. Then at Sundance, we got time together and we really got to sit down and, like just started immediately laughing and talking about our lives and the similarities between our lives and the similarities in the places that we come from and the people that we come from. I just always treated it as a friendship. Like I never talked to him about work. We never talked about working on anything together or anything like that. I mean, enough people, I think, are trying to get stuff from Taika. So we just kept it as friendship and, but then that changed when he approached me. He's like, if you ever have anything, I have this overall deal at FX. If you have anything that you'd like to pitch. And then that's sort of all I needed to hear. And we both had these two ideas about kids from sort of our community. And his was more of a vigilante, sort of like Batman, like Mallory kid in the village. Mine was more kind of stand by me kids getting beat up at school and going to find this like legendary martial arts guy that is a recluse in the woods. They went to find him to train them how to fight. And so we took these two ideas and just sort of shook them up. And, that night came up with the basic idea of Reservation Dogs.
You gotta be like vigilantes, not criminals.
Vigilantes. I like that.
It is the show that I would have, if you would have asked me like, what show would you make? What would be the number one show that you would want to make? It would be this show. So I feel very lucky. I'm grateful to Taika.
So it is the first show ever, as unbelievable as this is, with an Indigenous main cast and an Indigenous creative team. Knowing the show was carrying that mantle, what elements did you want to make sure you had in the show?
I didn't necessarily approach it like that. It was, I had this opportunity. I just knew I had this opportunity and I knew I had to swing for the fences, and I wanted it to be unapologetically native, everything, the humor. I wanted to put the humor first. I also didn't want to shy. I think that native people, we've gotten used to being precious about ourselves because I think through guilt and all kinds of things, non-natives treat us very like we're delicate and sort of like spiritual beings. And we needed to shake that off with this show. And I knew that I needed to bring a creative team that knew this world.
And there's such a sense of place in Reservation Dogs. Immediately, you film it in Oklahoma, where you're from and where the show is set. Can you talk about how you went about creating the world of the show visually?
At first, FX wanted to shoot in New Mexico because there's a lot of productions in New Mexico. I told my agents that I didn't want to do that. Like, I wouldn't want to do the show, or I would rewrite the show. And to everyone's surprise, I said that. And I went and took photos of rural Oklahoma and talked about, like, whenever you're making a show about Indigenous people, there's so much history of land displacement. Like, we were brought here on the Trail of Tears from Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and we were transplanted to Oklahoma. Then we rebuilt. There's so much tied into that, and there's so much history of character that's tied into that I had to shoot it here. And they got it immediately, and like I didn't have to fight. I was ready to like battle, and like die on a hill. But like they got it because it has a visual aesthetic. It has its own vibe, and the world is a little different here. And I just wanted to capture that, it was just really important to shoot here. I found a really great town, the town of Old Mulgee, which is where I'm at in my trailer while we're shooting season 2 right now.
Right.
Town of Old Mulgee. And it's a great town. It kind of has this mix of like industrial promise, but Western decay.
Right.
And,
At Main Street.
right. And this beautiful main street that was actually like founded by the Muskogee Creek people. And also, you know, it's being rebuilt now. It's kind of being revitalized. And also just like this playground for these kids to be on, you know, it just had the right vibe.
Can you talk about the casting process and how and where you found your core cast, but everyone, you know, your core cast is mostly relative unknowns, but how you went about finding them?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with casting director Angelique Midthunder, and, you know, she understood it from the beginning that she knew Native actors and has worked with Native actors a lot. And she understood that we had to go to the people. We had to go to the community to cast. Like that was essential. They're not going to come they're not going to come to LA and, you know, audition. So we had to go to these communities. We got tapes. We got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tapes. We went and did street casting where we just saw actors coming through in different communities where there's a lot of Native people. The actor that plays Cheese, Lane, that's what he came off the street. Just his mom like begged him to go and like bribed him to go and audition. He finally did. And, you know, now he's in this show and he's in a Spielberg movie and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow.
So it's been crazy.
When you find people like Lil Mike and Funny Bone, who play Mose and Mecca, like this little Greek chorus on bikes, do you create roles especially for them?
Well, no, I actually wrote that for young twins. And, you know, we were seeing some people, it was kind of hard to find twins. And then Angelique brought them up. I'd known them. You kind of know them if you're in the Native community. They're always around. They're rappers. They're always selling CDs and just kind of a part of the community. And so
they were on America's Got Talent. I didn't realize that. I saw their video.
It was kind of a no-brainer to cast them.
Yeah.
When I saw their audition, it was like, oh yeah, they have to be in the show. So, and you know, like I wanted it to be a celebration of a community.
Indy Mafia have been telling everybody they at war with y'all. Yeah. Told them y'all was the Reservation Dogs since y'all didn't like Res Bandits.
And Reservation Dogs is obviously a comedy first and foremost, but it also addresses serious issues like suicide in Native communities, which is a huge crisis. How did you find the right tone for the show?
I don't know. Like, I've been asked that, and it's hard to explain because I think it actually lends itself to our humor, Native humor, the pacing of it. I think that it's always been kind of close to tragedy because it's about survival.
Yeah.
Humor has always been about survival. It's like laughing in the face of all of this tragedy that's surrounding us.
With these kids, their friend Daniel has killed himself, which we learned toward the end of the season. Can you talk about how you built to that, revealing that's how he died?
Yeah, it was really important for us not to try to shock people with it. We wanted to slowly let you know what was coming, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think that because of that, people that have dealt with that themselves, which is always a concern of ours because it is such a thing in our communities, we didn't want anyone to feel triggered or hurt by it or to feel like we were taking it lightly. So we really wanted to let people know that it was coming. You know, like I had people that dealt with suicide and reach out to me and say, you know, I think it's like almost a year later, like we didn't watch the episode where we knew it was happening because we knew that was happening.
Right.
And we just recently went back and finally watched it and it was beautiful. But it like gave them the opportunity to not watch that episode because it was going to be very hard for them, you know? So I'm grateful that we approached it that way.
In the tonal opposite of that story, you have the hilarious character of Spirit, William Knifeman, who regularly appears as a vision to Bear. How did you come to that idea of creating that character?
Like, to a non-Native audience, if we asked everyone in the world, draw what you think a Native American looks like, they would not draw me. They would draw William Knifeman.
Yeah.
99% of them.
Right.
So it was like giving the audience something that's very familiar so they could kind of relax and be like, oh, I do know this world. but then also turning it around and saying, isn't this ridiculous that this is the only reference you have to our community? And we just got through showing you 10 minutes of our community that you don't recognize, but you like, or whatever. But like, here's what you're used to. Let's all make fun of it together and laugh at it together. And it's kind of like an inviting, I think that character invites the non-native audience in on the joke and allows them to be like, oh, I get it now. Like, I get where this humor is. I get where it comes from. I get what's going on, you know? So I think that character was essential to the show, really.
So you got any plans today, or are you?
Yeah, I think I should be going. I got another vision to do.
You're currently in Oklahoma in production on season 2. What's the biggest lesson you learned from season 1 that you've brought to this new season?
Try to get more sleep.
How's it going?
Not great. And, you know, I think that there's a confidence that I have now that I didn't have before.
Where are you in terms of the timeline of production is it going to be 8 episodes again? 10. Great.
Yeah, we have about 3 weeks left.
Did you know when you started writing the first season that only Allora would be the one to leave the reservation?
No. Did not. That happened, I think, in the writer's room. We came up with that. But we didn't know when we first started writing the show that would happen. And we didn't know what the conflicts between these characters were going to be necessarily when we wrote the pilot. I mean, it's in there, but that all kind of blossomed into something bigger as the show went on, you know.
Might we see Wes Studi again in season 2?
Might.
Is there anything else about season 2 that I should ask you that you want to say?
I mean, you know, one of the things that I would say is like, one of some of my favorite episodes are the ones that break off with characters, like the driver's license or the hunting episode, you know. Mm-hmm. We have some really great moments where we break out and kind of go into these one-off episodes, but then come back in a really great way as well. So that's, I don't know, I really love the way that this season does that.
Was there any feedback you took from your own community that you took to heart that you applied to season 2?
My community loves it so much, and nothing could make me happier. You know, like the fact that they responded the way that they did is that's it for me. You know, like that's the goal. It's been a really beautiful thing. I think that the one thing that, you know, you definitely listen to, and you can't represent everyone. One of the things that I think we do better with, you know, you'll see a wider representation of Indigenous people in the show.
2 of your season 1 cast, Devery Jacobs, who plays Allora, and Dallas Goldtooth, who plays Spirit, joined the writer's room for season 2. How did that happen, and what have they brought to the second season?
I mean, Dallas has been in my comedy group we've been in a comedy group together for a long time. So we've kind of already been writing together.
Yeah.
And Devery is such a good filmmaker herself and a writer herself, and understands the character of Allora so well that you start writing to her and you start taking ideas from her. And so it was like naturally to bring her into the room and let's write this character together, you know.
I was just telling them that you hold the record for most knockouts in one night at Old Muggy's bar. 10 people.
10 people? I knocked out 20 people one night.
Yeah, it was just a no-brainer for me to bring them into the room, and it makes the show better.
You've managed to build your career while living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You made independent movies for years on micro budgets. Can you talk about that, like how you've achieved what you have?
I don't know. Like I tried to go to LA. I tried to get movies made. No one was making feature films about Native people. They just didn't want to. And I just saw the writing on the wall. I came back to Oklahoma and I just made my films here. And it was never about making money or having fame or anything like that to me. It was about telling these stories because I fell in love with the medium so much. And then, you know, TV streaming happened, and all of a sudden people were interested in different stories. And all of a sudden I started getting hired, and all of a sudden I started taking meetings, and all of a sudden I had agents and a manager, and like, and everyone's first reaction to me was like, where have you been? Like, you've been like doing so much work. Like, how have you done this much work? And I really just kind of held my head down and made films. So it was easy to get hired after that. Like, it was easy to show like, look, I did all this, you know.
Do you feel like things have started to change? I mean, there's Rutherford Falls, there are some things coming up.
There's so much coming. Like, you know, there's Rutherford Falls, there's Reservation Dogs, but, you know, Sierra has another show. You know, I have other shows. Everyone else we know has a show that's in development. I think that you're going to have a lot of really cool projects coming out. And that's what's exciting to me, is to see the diversity in our own stories, you know, and I think that's what will make it. That's what will provide staying power for all of us. It's like, it's not just it's not a fluke, you know, it's like there's a vast well of stories to be told in these communities.